Yeah, thanks for joining us here today on Mother's Day. I wanted to make a special note. I know possibly some of you came because you're like, oh, she's not talking about Mother's Day today. And you know, Mother's Day can be triggering for some of us, but I wanted to take a moment to honor that as a culture. You know, we are collectively celebrating this special day, and I want to take the opportunity now to just take a moment to give thanks to all of the mothers out there. And when I say mothers, I really mean it in the broadest sense. I know that a couple years ago, Mark Thies shared on Mother's Day about how he knew he was going to become a father, but he didn't also know that as a single father, he would also become a mother. And so we honor everyone who has played a motherly role here today. But I want to take a moment also to honor, you know, as someone who's never been a biological mother, that I want to honor not only those of us who are celebrating our motherhood and the ways in which we celebrate the mothers in our lives, but I want to hold space for those of you who are grieving your mothers, or grieving the mother you didn't get to be, or grieving the mother you wish you had. You know, so we just hold space for all of that here in this moment. And I want to take a moment just to even be silent in that. If we could close our eyes together, and if we can hold that space of community in which, for those who are celebrating, we join them in celebrating. For those who are grieving, we join you in comfort and in love. For those like me, for whom it's a mixed bag, we join you in that confusion. Just the holding of space and all of that. And we give thanks for the diversity and complexity of the beauty that is life. And so it is. Amen. So today, we are moving into part 3 of a 5, maybe 6-part series, depending on how long I draw this out, on The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer. And in our first week, we explored the concept of awakening consciousness. So in that week, what we looked at is the question of identity. And those of you who weren't here know that there's a YouTube video available on it. But in that week, we begin to question who we think we are. You know, the idea that each morning as we get up, we have all these various thoughts and voices going on in our heads. And my invitation to each of us that week was to consider that if you're able to hear the various dialogues in your own consciousness, that perhaps it's not you. That you are not the voices in your head, but instead, you are that. You are the awareness that can hear it, that can observe it. And in the coming into the knowing of that, we begin to realize a certain degree of spiritual identity and then spiritual freedom. What if you are not all the chatter that goes on every day, and how most of us try to choose between, am I the voice that says, eat the cookie, or am I the voice that says, no, right? Like, who am I authentically? Maybe you are neither of those things. And so, as you start to ponder that question, the answer doesn't become clear necessarily right away. We're moving away from being identified with those voices into an unknown sense of this fuller sense of who we are, what we would call here in Unity our divine nature. And so from there, we moved into part 2, and we were so blessed that Maka shared with us on the theme of experiencing energy. And so now, what if, you know, usually we think of energy as like, wow, today I did these various things and I'm less energetic, or I did those things, or I met someone new and I got energized. There was a new topic of study that I loved and I got energized. And we think of energy often as coming from the outside. But as Maka shared with us last week, there is a growing awareness we can have as we identify with our divine nature, that we all have access to infinite energy all of the time, all of the time. That this life force that is spirit is the very truth of our being. So the problem is not that we have to go find sources of energy out there, but rather that we need to locate the ways that we are blocked to that ongoing source, that wealth, that source of richness, that wellspring from within us. And so today, we'll be focused on part 3 of the book, which is titled Freeing Yourself. And in here, we start to recognize, whoa, the ways in which I felt constricted were not about needing to find more energy sources in the world, but needing to locate the parts in me that have become blocked down. And by becoming aware of those, freeing my own inner energy so that I am free to live more vibrantly, more fully, not so constricted and constrained, so I am free to live in a way where I can express my full divine potential, that I am free to have fulfillment in my relationships, that I am free to experience deep security and certainty in the world. And so we open ourselves today to that freedom. Hey, now I feel, hi. So last week, the weather was spectacular, right? It was so beautiful outside. I spent a lot of time hiking, taking walks, and I have a friend who walks his dog on a daily basis, well, twice a day, and so I've been joining him on these walks. And so we walked in Loose Park, and one day I happened to not be prepared, and I was wearing these shoes that were kind of uncomfortable for walking. So my friend suggested that I take my shoes off, which I never do. Usually I have these hiking boots or these rough shoes that I can walk in. So I took my shoes off and walked barefoot, for the first time really, in Loose Park. So at first I'm tentative, but I start to, we're going through the grass. We're not just on the pavement, we're going through the grass. I'm like, oh, this is what the earthing thing is all about, and of course the dog loves mud more than he loves grass. So we're actually trekking through muddy areas, but I'm experiencing how, oh, this is fun. My toes are getting all kind of gross and whatever, but it felt good. Until the very end, when I put on my shoe again, my sandal, I started walking on my sandal, and I noticed there was this sharp pain in the middle of my foot. And when that happens, you automatically wonder, oh, is there something in between that got caught? So, right, I'm doing that thing of trying to shift your sandal and get rid of this little twig or something is what it feels like. It's just really sharp pain. And I take my shoe off, try to clean it out, doesn't work. And then, so maybe I didn't clean it well enough. So I take the shoe off and try to clean it. I start walking a little more. It still hurts. And so, what happens when the bottom of your foot hurts, when there's a sharp pain there? You curl your foot up, right? So I'm trying to walk and curl my foot up and kind of constrict around this little area until finally I got to come home, have a well-lit place, and I look inside, I look and I really get to examine my foot. And I realize, oh, there wasn't something sort of outside and in between. There was a little shard of glass that was lodged into my foot. And I'm glad I found that. So, those of you who've ever had something like a splinter know that generally, if you don't touch it at all, it doesn't hurt. It's only when there's pressure on it, right? And especially if you're trying to take it out of your foot, it hurts a lot. And so I was being very careful, kind of using my nail, and I kind of took it out and put some disinfectant on it. That was the weekend. So I go back to Michael Singer's book to prepare for this coming week. And this is a book that I'm probably rereading for the 4th, maybe 5th time now. And I open the book to the chapter called Removing Your Inner Thorn. So, of all the 4 chapters that comprise part 3, I think this is the one I'll be focused on, right? Removing your inner thorn. Now, I thought about how when something like that happens, at least my instinct, I don't know about yours, is to get rid of the piece of glass. If there's a splinter in my foot, my instinct is to get rid of it. It's not to, oh, Nhien, just leave it there. Instead of getting rid of it, why don't you get that special moleskin, that's good for hiking? Like if you put it on your foot, I once had a huge blister and hiked 19 miles because I was able to put moleskin on the bottom of my foot. It can protect your feet from pain if you have a blister. So I don't think, oh, I'll put moleskin on it instead and just leave that little shard of glass in my foot. I don't think, oh, well, you know what? I can still go hiking. I can just go on shorter trails. I know that longer trail is more beautiful, but let's just take this short, quick trail here because my foot hurts when we walk. I don't think I'll leave it in here, but I will conform the rest of my life in my journey around the pain in my foot. But as Michael Singer points out, we do that. Most of us, if not say all of us, if we're deeply honest with ourselves, do that all the time when it comes to our emotional pain. That what happens, he says, is that, here's the example he uses. Imagine that you have a thorn in your arm, right? And it's perfectly fine if nobody and nothing touches it. But if, say, he uses this example even, if you go hiking in the woods and the trees brush against it, there's like a sharp pain. Oh, and he says, and imagine that the thorn is like right next to a nerve, so it's that like sharp pain. So if you just brush it, it's going to hurt, right? And so he says, and not only that, so you're going to kind of decide whether or not you're going to go hiking and enjoy the outside world. But he also, if it's in your arm, you're going to have trouble sleeping. You're going to have to figure out how to roll around or lie on the pillow a certain way, buy a special pillow, and you're going to have to rearrange your life, to avoid this pain. And he said, what happens to most of us is that within us, we have lodged within ourselves this emotional pain. And rather than deal with it and deal with maybe the excruciating pain of extracting it and letting it go, because that can feel harder. It can be scary. We're not even sure how much it hurts. Instead, we use all of our smarts and think, you know what? I'm going to create an apparatus that's going to enable me to sleep a certain way, and then I won't ever roll onto that one arm and that pain. And I do, and I'm successful. And then I get on Oprah, and I get to talk about it. And I get to tell people how all of you, the pain that we're all experiencing, I've figured out how to avoid it, right? If you could just use this contraption. But then, in Michael Singer's example, he said, but then suddenly you find, oh, wait a minute, but I want love in my life. Carry this contraption. It's kind of hard to get close to somebody with this big contraption. And so what am I going to do? I'm going to invent an even better apparatus that has breathing room. It's going to enable me to kind of feel close and connected through this contraption. But it's a bigger one, and I probably have to create a larger front door in order to kind of get out the door. And there are all these things. But here's the thing for most of us. What happens is I create this, and I use it for so long, and I'm like, hey, this is working. Sure, I have to have a bigger door, but I've figured it out. I have a bigger door. I can do this. And so we go on for a while in our lives, not realizing that our life is tailored around avoiding this pain until something happens that our apparatus doesn't protect us from, and then we feel the pain, right? But what do we do when we feel the pain? Well, I have another little piece that I'm going to add to this equipment, if you will, instead of feeling the pain. And so today, my invitation is to consider that the beginning of true spiritual freedom is first recognizing the ways in which perhaps all of us in our own way are living in relationship to pain and the fear of pain. And that we can never be truly free and live our most vibrant life until we first take a look and acknowledge what constructs in my life, what apparatus have I created in order to protect this little self I think I have? But that is actually keeping me from the fullest life possible. So my invitation is to consider, could that be true? In what ways might that be true for me, that I'm living to avoid certain pain? And then recognizing that, Michael Singer offers us a way out. And that way out for him is called surrender or letting go. And in this way, it's a way very contrary to how most of us are taught in the world, which is, normally something comes up for me, I get triggered around a phone call with my mother, and I can feel the upset starting to rise. And before I became familiar with this kind of surrender work, what would be the first thing I'd do? I'd analyze it. I have a wealth of psychological information within me. So I'm like, oh, I'm upset because, in the moment I start analyzing, I'm not letting the pain move. I'm not letting myself feel it. Another option is chocolate. And I mean, have you ever been stumped, writing something or trying to accomplish something, and suddenly you have a craving, right? It's sort of like we do not want to feel the pain of the distress of not being able to accomplish that thing, or not feeling like we have the tools to speak our truth and say what we need to in this relationship, or, maybe I'm anticipating going to the doctor, and the fear of that, and so we analyze or we medicate. Television, sleeping, reading about stuff. What are the different ways in which, if I was really paying attention, I'd realize I never actually let that pain come up and release. I do whatever I can to not deal with it. And so, not dealing with it, I continue to carry it through my life, and I continue to build things to protect it. And so, one of the things that I want to share this quote from Brené Brown. Perfectionism is the 20-ton shield that we carry around, hoping that it will keep us from being hurt. So for many of us, there are different strategies we take for how we are going to actually immunize ourselves from feeling sort of the pain of our lives. If, say, we have a fear of rejection, right, this deep fear of rejection, we may not always even be conscious of it. But what happens instead is what? We wear the right clothes. Depending on what the social group is, maybe we become an expert in that area of knowledge, so we become invaluable to that community so that we will not be rejected. Maybe we become the person who gives and gives and gives, and so, why would I be rejected? I'm the one who helps. I make it happen. I make it happen. We give ourselves away in ways we compromise in relationships in order to avoid that rejection. We have these contraptions around ourselves so that, I might not even be conscious that I'm afraid of that. All I know is I just want to be, as attractive, as smart, as competent as possible. I don't realize that behind that perfectionistic orientation that I have, that what I'm actually trying to do is shield that thorn. And for me, as an Enneagram type 1, for those of you, the core pain is the pain of not being enough. The belief that no matter what, no matter how much I improve, but like if I can keep focusing on my improvement, if I can keep focusing on bettering myself, then my attention's over there, rather than, and it's all of these awards and all of these compliments, all of these ways I'm affirmed out there gets to protect me from feeling the thorn inside myself. And the fact that Brene Brown's TED Talk was fast became the most watched of all the TED Talks when it came out, was a testament to how when she talked about perfectionism as really the way in which everyone in our society, this is what we do. We wear it as a badge. I'm a bit of a perfectionist when it comes to my music. We wear it as a badge when really it's a shield. You see that each way, and that each of us does that. And she said what it's hiding is our deep-rooted shame. And shame, some of you might have heard the distinction between shame and guilt, whereas guilt is this sort of feeling of unworthiness for something wrong that we did. Shame is just this feeling of unworthiness, surely for who we are. And that maybe at core, all of us have that to some degree, an issue of not even believing that our core identity, our truth, is okay. And if we're not okay, there are things we're going to need to do. So I want to bring in the Enneagram framework very briefly because it's so supportive here. So, those of you who know the Enneagram, some of you may have already heard about this. This is called the fall. So in Christian traditions, we talk about the fall of humankind. And it's embodied by the triangle here on the Enneagram at points 9, 6, and 3. So if you consider this, these are points that reside within all of us. If you consider point 9 as the place in which, at the very top, we are connected to God, wholeness, our true nature. We know who we are. We have in our identity, in our oneness with Spirit, we're solid. But what happens in this drop into the belief in duality and separation is then we drop down to point 6 on the Enneagram. And point 6 is an Enneagram type, but we're talking about it as a point now, an archetype. And at point 6, which is represented by fear, if you think about it, the next response, right, to that belief in separation, holy, right? This existential fear, I'm all alone in the world. And so this happens to all of us to some degree, this sense of being self-reliant, separate from others, separate from our source of good, separate from love, separate from the ground of being, separate from our belonging to other people and to the rest of life. And in that separateness, this fear, what happens is, in this Enneagram framework, this fear feels intolerable. We are not actually going to face this profound sense of isolation, this profound sense of not belonging to the world. And so each of us goes to point 3, which is the point called the image area of the Enneagram. This is where we construct our identity, our personality. This is, in a way, the apparatus. So we each create a personality. We each decide, this is going to be the way that I get my needs met. This is going to be the way that I'm going to feel okay and protect myself from that pain, whether it's the fear of rejection, the fear of financial insecurity and not having security in the world, just the fear of the wrath of the world, the feeling that the world is dangerous and I have to protect myself from it. So there are different things that we fear at core. And depending on that, we develop a personality structure. And so we sit here, all of us, as in some ways, apparatus to apparatus, kind of like we connect in those ways. And so, but the beauty of life, though, is that when we start to recognize this, then when you have a problem, when I have a problem, now I understand my problem is a good thing. Why? Because I've been chugging along, lugging this apparatus, feeling okay until something breaks it. And so something got through because the apparatus wasn't perfect. I can give you some examples of what happened for me, thinking about my own sort of fear of rejection because of not being good enough. So in the dating world, I realize that now that I'm in the dating world again, and that's a very sort of raw and vulnerable place to be in. And I realized that years ago, I don't think I ever asked anyone to hang out. I never put myself out there in that way. My strategy to stay safe is to construct something attractive enough on all levels, whether it's intellectual, this and that, so that people come to me. How safe is that? And so, but in that, what is the world that I'm missing, right? So I'm missing an entire world of not just romantic, but friendship relationships that I could venture into because I feared the risk of just asking someone to be my friend, to spend time. And so recently, I found that I'm doing both as I'm rebuilding my life. I've been asking girlfriends or potential girlfriends to happy hour, to just spend time together, asking people to go on hikes and enjoy that time. And that's really risky. It risks the pain of rejection. But recently what's been happening is, because I've been doing it, I've been rejected a few times. There are times when, that's what it feels like. What's actually happening is they have another, appointment or something, right? But it feels like, oh, well, but I just, okay. You have that just vulnerability of, okay, well, I'm okay, really, But and the old me, what would the old me do? Well, you know what? I have 5 other friends I'm going to ask out, right? And you have this way, that's building the apparatus. I'm going to call my friends, and they're, the friends that I do have. So the way we do it is we buttress ourselves. So right when I'm about to feel the pain of who am I if you don't want to hang out with me? I go and I call the friends I know, and they're going to tell me, yo, Nhien, oh, you're so lovable and so likable, and we love you so, we do these things to protect ourselves. And it's not all relational. For some of us, it is more like it's physical, right? It's the sense of security in my health and well-being in the world. And if that feels sort of threatened or jeopardized, or someone, someone contests whether I'm weak or this or that, I will research, I will do what it takes to, build my health. Whatever it is. It's different for each person. For me, it's very relational. But in that moment, Michael Singer's teachings are so profound. Because what happens is, instead of doing that, instead of going back to the ways in which, this thorn is going to constantly be pounded and be sharp and painful every time someone says no. Really, Nhien? And then people will say no so often that you're just going to stop asking again, and your world will become smaller. And this is just a little example of how it happens. But if instead we took that moment where, whether it's our child, our parent who rejects us, let's give a kind of a bigger example, since it's Mother's Day. I have a dear friend who lost his father just a few weeks ago. And I was there at hospice and supporting the whole family in that. And it's complicated, showing up for something like that. Because on the one hand, you're supporting them in their pain, and on the other hand, as a fellow human being, you're watching, and I'm going, wow, they band together in a way my family never did. That you can kind of see the difference in even how they're able to kind of experience their grief. And so I had some triggers around my family, but I'm like, you're empowered now, Nhien, and just recognizing that we have a finite time on this earth. On the drive home, I decided to call my mother. I'm like, I'm going to go on a sabbatical next month, and I have a whole month and a half free, and so maybe I'll go visit my family. So I was all excited, thinking I'm the daughter they've been waiting to have call home, and I call my mother, and she sounds awfully busy the moment she picks up the phone. And I feel myself tensing up. I was like, okay, Mom's always busy to talk to me. Like I have this, I'm like, that little teary, you can just feel it. And I was like, well, I might be able to visit in June, Mom. And she's like, and there's a pause. There isn't a, yeah, we'll come home. There's a pause. She's like, well, your dad and I are going to Alaska on a cruise in the beginning of, June. And then your dad and your brother are taking a trip to Vietnam. And, so maybe you can come home, but let's try to figure out, but just the hesitancy, I could feel, you feel that, oh, okay, I can just feel myself shaking a little bit of these old triggers of, I know why I left home, and was like, I'll let, the world will love me because home doesn't love me. I had that reaction to my home life. And I've done a lot of repairing of that, but this was just 2 months ago or so, and I could feel that trigger again. Through this practice, you learn, oh, all that means is there's this thorn still inside of me. This incident is wedging it so that it can be ready to be released. And I could decide to protect myself, in which case I just shove it right down until the next thing happens, or I can let it sort of work its way up. And so in that moment, I chose to stay with the feeling. Let it release. Let it release as a physical sensation in your body. And the reason I say let it release as a physical sensation is when you start to think of it as anything else, you're thinking about the feeling and not feeling it. And so, it's like an anxiety that bubbles up and comes through and wants to choke my throat. You can feel that, and you can let yourself feel it. And in the chapter right before the one on removing thorns, Michael Singer says, let go or fall. And by let go, my understanding of what he means is let it go. Let it go or fall into a spiral again of that thinking. See, they never loved me anyway. No, I'm not good enough. I better go accomplish some more things. I better go improve and become a better daughter. And then maybe they won't be so reluctant to see me, And so as this process has emerged, all I know for me personally is that the sense of liberation that says, you know what? I'm free to love you. Because I don't have this thing that I'm trying to guard and protect in myself. And the beauty of, the next slide, please. The beauty of this work and how it can tie back to this profound Enneagram framework is when my egoic structure failed, apparently I couldn't ever be a good enough daughter for her not to sometimes kind of say no to me. The breakdown of that outer structure is the beginning of greater freedom. When we let it dissolve, what happens is we go back down to the fear of my unworthiness, and I can feel that and let myself feel that. And only by letting myself feel that can I go back to point 9, where I know my true nature. This is home. This is oneness. I can't skip over that. I can't get it by making a better image at number 3. And so for each of us, every time we say yes to experiencing the intensity of what is before us, instead of telling a story about who's right or wrong, instead of getting our friends to conspire in our position, instead of reading about it so we don't actually feel it, or analyzing it because we have every self-help book from the bookstore in our own library, if we're willing to actually stop from our busyness of being productive, stop from our compulsive eating or watching of television, stop from our compulsive helping of other friends. Some of us are so good about seeing everybody else's problems, and we can spend all of our psychic energy there instead of feeling the pain of that inner thorn and letting it work its way back out in the sharpness of the pain of something just having hit, right? So let go or fall back into a spiral and live in a way where I don't have to tell, I think, each person the ways in which there's more, whether it's the risk of community and friendship, or whether it's the ways in which you would adventure and travel in the world, but you fear financial insecurity. There are ways in which each of us constrict our lives every day, ways in which we aren't truly free, that we can simply begin in gentle baby steps. The beauty is we don't have to look for these triggers. They usually happen to us every day. But we do need to pay attention, because our habituated instinct, right, is to get busy again, go forth, and not even notice, oh my God, that hurt. That hurts. Let it hurt so it can stop hurting, right? And so I'll just close with some quotes from Michael Singer. The reminder, if you are doing something to avoid pain, then pain is actually running your life, that you're not actually truly free. And the hope, as Michael Singer says, and this is not up there, it's a longer quote, every day we bear a burden that we should not be bearing. We fear that we are not good enough, or that we will fail. We experience insecurity, anxiety, and self-consciousness. We fear that people will turn on us, take advantage of us, or stop loving us. All of these things burden us tremendously. As we try to have open and loving relationships, and as we try to succeed and express ourselves, there is an inner weight that we carry. This weight is the fear of experiencing pain, anguish, and sorrow. Every day, we are either feeling it or we are protecting ourselves from feeling it. And it is such a core influence, says Michael Singer, that we don't even realize how prevalent it is. And the prerequisite for true freedom, he says, is to decide that you do not want to suffer anymore. You must decide that you want to enjoy your life, and there is no reason for stress, inner pain, or fear. Because if we understand that all of these machinations, all this stuff, is to protect ourselves from pain, but we come into this profound realization that there is no hurt, no pain, no emotion that can arise in us that we are not capable of letting ourselves feel. Then we can live more unguarded for the present and into the future. Am I afraid, like, what, am I making the right choice or the wrong choice? Like, I can torment over a decision that I was recently making. Or I can be like, oh, the torment is about how driven I am to avoid pain. Now I know I'm free. Now I know I can let myself feel pain and I will be okay. So I am free to live more fully, more vibrantly, to choose. But first, I have to remember when something comes up, let it up and let it go.